I could not move an arm, a leg, a finger, a toe, or any single muscle. They told my wife that I was dying. Donald DeMar vividly remembers his experience while in the hospital suffering from polio. He, like thousands of others, spent his summer in a sickly hospital room filled with other polio patients. The polio virus is both a triumph and a tragedy because it negatively impacted thousands of people by infecting them, but greatly improved the mobility and the strength of vaccinations today. Polio was a mysterious disease when it first became prevalent in the U.S. during the early 20th century because it was inconsistent and instilled fear into thousands of people. The polio virus enters the body through the nose or mouth and travels through the bloodstream to the victim's intestines. Once the virus has successfully reached the intestines, it strengthens itself so it can make the journey to the nervous system. After it penetrates the nervous system, the virus multiplies rapidly. The virus then attacks and destroys nerve cells. If the virus destroys too many nerve cells near the spinal cord, it leads to permanent paralysis. Once the virus enters the body, it only takes a few days for symptoms to show. Common symptoms include fever, coughing, sore throat, muscle soreness or stiffness, or loss of feeling in the legs. The fascinating thing about this virus was that roughly 90% of the people who contracted the disease never displayed symptoms and did not experience the brunt of the disease. Polio was like the common cold in the sense that the symptoms were very similar and the ability to contract the disease was quite easy. Like the common cold, the disease spread when one would touch the germ or virus on a surface than touch their nose or mouth. Also, poor sanitation and filth made it easier for the virus to survive on surfaces. Because of the ease of contracting this disease, it was most common for little children to get polio. The mystery behind the spread of this disease caused panic and fear among thousands of Americans. There was no drug or treatment to ward off the virus. Once contracted, the only treatments were hot packs, water, and physical therapy. For the unfortunate people that became permanently paralyzed, there were canes, wheelchairs, and the famous iron lung. Others experienced a more rapidly spreading poliovirus that reached their lungs and caused the muscle in their lungs to stop working. The only treatment available was a cylindrical tube that a patient lies in. It supplies air pressure that mimics the way lungs inflate and deflate when breathing. This disease was tragic for thousands of people who had to witness their child contract the illness. The disease was ruthless in the fact that it made children so sick, but fortunately most kids walked away unscathed physically but mentally suffered from fear. The epidemic also made many Americans distrustful of their neighbors and doctors because it was a mystery as to how it was contracted. So people blamed one another for spreading the disease. Once scientists and doctors figured out what polio was, they were able to begin research into tackling the disease. Scientist Albert Sabin was curious about the polio virus, so he conducted research in the hopes of making a vaccine to prevent children from getting the illness. He put the virus up a monkey's nose to see what the disease did. He found that once the disease entered the body through the nose, it went directly to the intestine, then moved its way up to the lymph nodes, and eventually to the brain. Sabin decided to take a sample of the virus from a child's stool and extracted that virus and put it into a vaccine. He injected this vaccine into a monkey to see the effects. He found that the vaccine created strong antibodies to protect the body from polio. It was then used on children, but in the form of an oral vaccine. Another scientist, Jonas Salk, also decided to research and create a vaccine. Unlike Sabin, who used a dead virus, Salk decided to use a live virus in his vaccine. This was preferred by doctors and other scientists because a weaker version of the live virus made better antibodies than the dead virus did. To test his vaccine, Salk had to have a population of people who were exposed to polio but did not receive any type of vaccination. So he tried his vaccination in Russia. Salk's vaccine was a huge success in Russia, and the U.S. immediately ordered it in bulk. For many, Salk's vaccine was a huge relief because there was finally a way to prevent the spread of this disease. Medicine today is constantly evolving, therefore the original polio vaccines from the 1950s are different from the vaccines today. Vaccines today are more condensed, so the strength of immunity is stronger and lasts longer. Vaccines today also focus on certain strains of the virus so it can protect the body better. Sabin's first oral vaccine was known as the monovalent oral vaccine because it only protected the body against one strain of the virus. Therefore, children could still get polio because their bodies were not immune to the other two strains of the polio virus. Years later, doctors figured out that they need to put more than one strain of the virus into the vaccine. So the new oral polio vaccine included all three strains of the polio virus. The new oral polio vaccine was used leading up to the eradication in the U.S. The new version that included all three strains maximized a child's immunity. Once eradication in the U.S. was achieved, doctors decided to use Salk's injection to keep children's bodies immune. Salk's injection will also be extremely helpful once polio has been eradicated globally because it will continue to protect the body from getting the disease, therefore making outbreaks impossible. Many organizations are working together to achieve the goal of a world without polio. The Global Polio Eradication Initiative, also known as GPEI, is a dedicated campaign developed by the World Health Organization in 1988 to end polio for good. Other organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have supplied and helped the GPEI try to reach their goal. They have donated money so the GPEI can pay for routine vaccinations. as well as donating technology to help monitor the spread of polio and the spread of vaccines. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation also created emergency shelters for polio patients in Nigeria, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. UNICEF has also been a strong aid to the GPEI. They have helped administer over 7 billion vaccinations in 2014 to children in third world countries. UNICEF also educated parents in villages how to be more hygienic to help prevent the spread of polio. The GPEI estimates that they will still need approximately $2 billion more to reach their goal by 2019. A world without polio would be beneficial for multiple reasons, but current world issue brings this reachable goal to a halt. Many third world countries that are in dire need of vaccines have very warm climates, which are terrible for storing vaccines. Because of this, the vaccines need to be stored and shipped in coolers, which makes the process of mobilizing vaccines more expensive. Also, in places like Nigeria and Afghanistan, the volunteers must be cautious because the peace is not consistent throughout the nations. In Syria, many children cannot receive their vaccines because of the war zones and hospitals being filled with victims of war. Pakistan also has a huge problem because the Taliban threatens mobilization of vaccines. Volunteers must have a Pakistani police officer to guard them. The Taliban also restricts where volunteers can go, so there are areas where children will not get inoculated. Despite these barriers, there have been great advancements that have made mobilization easier. GIS trackers have changed how the GPEI track what areas have been vaccinated and can even track how many children in an area have been vaccinated. This technology helps the organization know how many more vaccines they need and also what areas they need to target. Better medical testing also helps to accurately diagnose children so they can receive the medical care they need as soon as possible. Overall, eliminating polio would be extremely beneficial because the cost of vaccines could be put towards improving medical facilities in places like Pakistan or Syria. Polio is a detrimental disease that harms the well-being of families in third world countries, but the success of continuous monitoring and research, the mobility of the polio vaccine has increased tremendously. Using the process of eradicating polio as a platform, the world as a whole can figure out how to band together to eradicate polio and other diseases.